Okay, class. So the next author that we're looking at is Zora Neale Hurston, and she is considered to be the most important African American woman who wrote and contributed literature before World War II. She's from Florida. Her father was a preacher. To understand that he wasn't much of a family man. Her mother and her relationship with her mother was her entire world. She had a strong support system from her mother. And unfortunately, she died when she was 11. And Zora Hurston had to move from an all black town to a town that had white people there. And that's when she first kind of encountered, some serious racism that she had been protected from previously her entire life. And luckily, from her mother and her mother's attempts to educate her, and her father's education, being a preacher and being a very eloquent speaker, she had a lot of tools as far as like self confidence and her ability to think philosophically, um, that she needed to recognize that. One way to advance into life was, to achieve, for instance, power, not necessarily to overcome racism. And so, she moved up through the ranks. Like even though she never finished grade school, she ended up getting accepted into college in D.C. in Washington D.C. at uh, I think it was Howard University, if I remember right. But anyways, so she received, a fine education. She ended up, at Bernard, where she studied with an anthropologist, and really got into like black folk traditions, which is where this comes into modernism. The traditionalism aspect of modernism. Modernism. She really looked into her roots and those oral traditions, and then she got involved in Harlem in the Harlem Renaissance scene, where she became pretty well known as a performing artist, and that helped her storytelling and oral narrative in that way. So she ended up in Florida, getting some kind of fellowship to study oral traditions of Eatonville. And so she really got to studying folk and stories and stuff like that. And she started, kind of coming into the reality that a lot of the people that she would be writing for, her chief audience, and also her patrons, the people who are providing fellowships or paying her way, were often wealthy white individuals. And sometimes there was conflict between, what they wanted to see produced in terms of literature or output for the fellowship, or, whatever it was, and versus what they were writing. Anyways, so after the Great Depression, she went fully to writing, and you probably know her most for Her Eyes Were Watching God. But one of her main themes is about the woman's quest for selfhood, and it shows up over and over and over and over again in her writing. Um, let's see, she kind of butted heads a little bit with Langston Hughes and the Harlem Renaissance, a lot of the chief writers in there, where for instance, and here's a quote from the Norton: she rejected the idea that a black writer's chief concern should be how blacks were being portrayed to the white reader. She did not write to uplift her race either, because in her view it was already uplifted. She was not embarrassed to present her characters as mixtures of good and bad, strong and weak. Some of the other Harlem writers thought her either naive or egotistical, and ignoring appearances and insisting on going her own way. But Hurston felt that freedom can only mean freedom from coercion, no matter what the source. Okay, so let me explain a little bit about what that means about her having mixtures of good and bad in her character. In African American writing at this time, there is a very real need and caution to portray characters very positively, because whereas in society at the time, one white person's negative actions don't reflect poorly upon all white people. With African Americans, one African American's uh, poor behavior, whatever, somebody does a crime, whatever, and the whole race gets judged. And so these writers are very sympathetic to that and trying to, win equality and achieve equality in the society. So she, though, portrays, African American characters, as not perfectly, and she caught a lot of trouble for this. But what I think you'll find here, this How It Feels to Be a Colored Me, is an extremely good little short story, and it's kind of a little narrative. So that's how it fits into individualism, and it also has aspects of regionalism and traditionalism. But basically, this is her experience going and realizing, experiencing racism for the first time. And you'll see the kind of, she makes the idea of racism a little bit absurd. And it kind of checks a lot of these boxes for modernism. So I hope you enjoy it. It's extremely straightforward.